But I think for couples, I've seen a number of really interesting reasonings for beginning to engage in that community. Like one that's come up a few times has been things like chronic illness
Hmm.
and perhaps even like a trauma history where for whatever reason, the couple may not be able to engage in sex and intimacy in the way that they might want to at that time. And so expanding their relationship and opening that up may be really helpful for one or both partners to have their needs met. In another way, you could also see just people trying to try new things with one another and expand their sexual relationship by opening up their relationship as a whole.
Would you be able to share a little bit about consensual non-monogamy, what that looks like, what that means, different like forms of that so that people can have a better understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. So, consensual non monogamy is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It is when you are not kind of bound to a traditional monogamous style of relationship. You can be sexually intimate, emotionally intimate with just more than one other person. So, there's a few different ways that people might practice this in their own lives. So, it kind of falls into two major groups. The first is like hierarchical consensual non monogamy. And that's going to look like where you have a primary partner and then you might have secondary partners. So your primary partner might be your person who is your spouse. You might live in the same home, share finances, raise kids together. And then your secondary partners might be people that you still care for very deeply. You just don't really have them as an active part of your day to day life. That doesn't mean they're any less important. It's just that they fill a different role than the primary partner. And then the kind of other major form of consensual non-monogamy is just it's more egalitarian, where all of the partners are more equal. So you may have like more than one person that you're living with. You may have kids all together, share in finances all together. There's less of a hierarchy, less of a structure, and more just community sharing everything all together.
I love that. And even like within those two categories, there's so many that fall underneath that. I like that you broke that up into those two structures, is that there is a hierarchy where there's like a primary partner where the two of you decide kind of the parameters and what that looks like outside of your relationship versus the other group where it's everyone is equal, whether it's sexual, romantic, platonic. There is no priority over a particular partner. It's very open and fluid in that way, which both are pretty interesting and cool and have their own kind of parameters and boundaries and everything that individuals have to work through to make that work for them.
Yeah, there can be a lot of really good things and really beautiful things that can come out of consensual non-monogamy, but you're right, there are some challenges, and especially if you're transitioning from a traditional monogamous relationship into consensual non-monogamy, there's going to be hiccups because it's a pretty big change and
Mhm.
that's just what happens in life. But so long as there is good communication and clear boundaries and you're able to be open and honest with one another, you can make that transition as smoothly as possible.
Yeah. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about more of like the sub pieces of each of those two. Because I think this is a really big topic that can feel intimidating for a lot of people, or like you said, may have never heard of it and may think like it's just based on sex or wanting to have sex with other people. When I think that, yes, that's a piece of it, right? Just like how it's a piece of any relationship, but it's so much more than that, right? Like even research shows that individuals receive emotional support, like societal support, different roles, their needs are met in different ways, they're fulfilled in different ways, they get to explore their own sexuality in a different way, right? So it's so much more involved than just sex, but sex is an important part and also, something that is available through this relationship structure too.
It reminds me of something I always heard growing up of sex is a important part of relationships, but it's not the only part. There's a lot of other things going on. You're dealing with everyone's emotional needs, physical needs, family needs, everything. We're not talking about, it's we look at all relationships as a system. And
Mhm.
to just talk about the sexual component would be ignoring everything else going on there.
Yeah, and really minimizing the fulfilling parts and rewarding parts of a relationship outside of just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think that some of the other types of non-monogamy or consensual non-monogamy, right, if it's within the hierarchy, right, is if it's monogamish, right? So some couples may have, let's say, they can have like an open relationship where one or both partners outside of their primary relationship may have an emotional or sexual relationship with someone else. But they, talk about the parameters. That's kind of something that's decided on if it's okay to be emotional and or sexual. Can you name a couple of other ones underneath, like the hierarchy relationship ones for non-monogamy?
Yeah, you might see things like swinging or polyamory. I think sometimes the actual language may be kind of picked up by the person you're working with, and a lot of these terms I've found at least might be used somewhat interchangeably,
Mm-hmm.
and for that reason, I think like it's helpful for me at least. I don't want to speak for everyone out there, but it's helpful to just kind of look at okay, we're dealing with something in the consensual non monogamy umbrella,
Mm-hmm.
and however people want to define their individual relationship is kind of up to them and whatever they feel most comfortable with.
Absolutely. Hey, can you share a little bit of like the general idea around polyamory and swinging so people have a better idea? Because I know that each structure is going to have its unique features and things that are decided and agreed upon within the relationship or individuals.
Yes, so in those cases, you might see like a couple that has been together and they may be an established couple, and then for whatever reason, they may feel that their sexual needs are not necessarily being fulfilled entirely within this relationship and want to open up some doors to share their sexual experiences and emotional experiences with other people. And that can be a really great thing for kind of lighting up that spark in a marriage again.
And so, yeah, so that can look like swinging for some couples. So this is really just to let the audience members know like a better idea and understanding of this, because we kind of have an idea. We know we work with people who come in already have their own, whether it's labels or understanding of this. But for listeners who may not know, right, like swinging is when the couple has a sexual relationship with another couple, or they may swap and that they're present with each other. It's not necessarily that it is a separate sexual experience, although sometimes it may be, right? Like in different rooms or different places, but it's an experience kind of that they want to share together as a couple.
Exactly. And then you might look at an open relationship, which may be a little more separate, where if you're looking at let's say, a heterosexual married couple with an open relationship, they may seek out partners separate from one another and do that on their own time, and they may just keep their dating life separate from their married life a little more.
Mhm. And then we have polyamorous, right? Where it's actually a relationship with more than one person. So, like you said, it could be a separate partner. So, like one partner within the relationship might have their own second partner, or all three of them might be in a romantic and or sexual relationship together. And they may not date other people, or each partner may have another partner, right? So, it kind of just depends on how they want to work that out.
And that's really exciting because that's when you get into that non hierarchical type
Mm-hmm.
of consensual non monogamy where everything is a little more, equal and fluid with one another.
Yeah. And so have you found some particular main reasons or benefits for whether it's a monogamous relationship to want to explore and expand into a non-monogamous relationship, or for individuals to participate in one just from the start?
I can't necessarily speak regarding individuals. I honestly haven't had as much experience in working with individuals in the CNM community.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for couples, I've seen a number of really interesting reasonings for beginning to engage in that community. Like one that's come up a few times has been things like chronic illness and perhaps even like a trauma history where, for whatever reason, the couple may not be able to engage in sex and intimacy in the way that they might want to at that time. And so expanding their relationship and opening that up may be really helpful for one or both partners to have their needs met. In another way, you could also see just people trying to try new things with one another and expand their sexual relationship by opening up their relationship as a whole, which is also really cool to see.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm glad you brought up the piece where it's trauma or chronic illness, right? Because I know that, so I see a lot of couples where there might be a mismatched sex drive. One partner might be more like a higher desire for sex, while the other partner, whether that may be a traumatic background or a chronic illness or something that has occurred for them, that becomes a sore spot in their relationship, and so much focus is placed on that and so much pressure that becomes, it just eats up the relationship. And so being able to take that pressure off this one person to fulfill that role for you and allow the relationship to focus more on the pieces and the strengths that are working, and knowing that they can receive that need somewhere else, I think increases their intimacy emotionally and sometimes even sexually as well, because, we know that pressure is not a sexy thing. It's definitely a turnoff. And feeling like you're disappointing your partner constantly also doesn't help that process either. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it does allow the couple to get their needs met from other individuals. And once that pressure is taken away, it actually adds so much more to the relationship and appreciate one another a lot more too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, especially when you're looking at maybe trauma, for example, when you're talking about someone who, like, they really do need to go on their own healing journey from whatever may have happened, taking off that pressure of their partner wanting to have sex can be so helpful with their
Yeah.
with their own process of healing.